The previous things I used to do, such as Indian and Métis organizations and co-ops and adult education work that I used to carry on with in the past. So I would say definitely this prospecting was a new life, new interests, new people, and an entire past.
Disappointed by the collapse of the co-ops and the lack of government support, Brady retreated to La Ronge to focus on prospecting work. Brady also reconnected with Norris through their participation in conferences and lectures in universities.
He seemed to be like, the fact that he maybe was still looking for something that he didn't have, And I think the fact, even some of our children that time were very small at the times, and he seemed to be very interested in talking to them. There was a side to him there. Real, a family, a humane type, that he felt maybe he was missing. And he said sometimes in the bush, he said, it's good to be out in the bush here, it's great to be in the bush. But he said at times it can be very lonely. And I think that's what he felt,
Living in a small shack in La Ronge, he continued to educate and nurture young minds on the ideals of decolonization and communist ideology.
We used to sit there with him for hours, and he would educate us as we're sitting there. That's when he would give us our little lectures and educate us, and gave us books to read that were probably at that point in my life where they were written in a way that it would be hard for me to understand a lot of it.
Younger people, your generation of people, are not politicized. They don't have the politics that an older generation had, the generation of your parents. Yeah? I think we were much more politically astute. That's not saying anything bad, It's saying that, not saying that you don't understand what's happening, but you don't have the radical kind of politics that we had.
Fights back
yeah,
too.
Today there's a lot of acceptance of things that happen. Maybe because people are not exposed to sitting around the kitchen table while they're trying to play, and their parents are having these big political discussions.
Jim Brady and Abby Halkett went missing during a prospecting trip in northern Saskatchewan in June of 1967. Following their disappearance, a search and rescue mission went looking for the two men.
Now, the day they flew in there, it was a low overcast day, very poor, very low ceiling, and it was a tough day for flying. But the pilot flew in there, and what he thought was he circled the area, and of course there was no mention. Jim and them were sitting in the plane too, but nobody's mentioned, hold it, this is the wrong lake, They never thought, it was too low. You get down low like that, you can't see very far. And of course, so they landed on the lake, taxied into the shore, unloaded, took all their stuff there. So they journeyed out there. But first of all, when they called in to Josh, they were joking. He joked, and he had his humor side too. Josh said, how are things going? And by this time it was snowing at their camp. Snow was coming down. Just nice, gentle, it was fairly warm, wet flakes coming down. He said, if it keeps on snowing like this, maybe you better send us in some snowshoes. Now, this was in June. So they laughed on the radio about this. And so he said, otherwise, we'll give you a call tonight. He said, I'll call you tonight.
Jim Brady and Abby Halkett radio a nearby mine site upon arriving at where they think is Upper Foster Lake. It's been theoried that the two men were dropped off at the wrong location at Lower Foster Lake. Recent evidence and testimony supports this theory.
There was a report in the office that these two people were, they haven't heard from these two people. They were out there prospecting, And we went down there to look around, and they call that place Lower Foster. So we went there with an RCMP aircraft. That's where we went to look around. We found their cabin where they lived, where they were staying. No, it doesn't look like this. They got up in the morning, ate and everything, and all this stuff was there. But Their canoe was found on the north side of the lake, tied up to the shore. That's our canoe. We looked all over the place, and there was no sign of them or anything.
There's 10,000 lakes out there, but in that where they found his boat and canoe, you know, where they found a canoe, and where he was, he's not very far away from there. Now, how much did those at that particular time? I don't know if we had divers, RCMP divers. If you probably went back in there and looked for these people, you'll probably find them today.
The thing that stood out to me was, I looked around all over the place. There was no fire. There was no sign of a fire. And that's a danger signal right there. You know, this is your last resort. And they were hungry by this time and everything else. And under those conditions, and that weather, you could not survive long without a fire.
Extensive land, air, and water searches failed to find any trace of the two men. Many theories and rumors surround their disappearance, but to this day, the case remains unsolved.
I just can't figure out how anybody could be missing. Like Hugh and I, if we went out boating in a canoe, we won't just tie in our canoe. We'll pull it up. Anyway, that's what I do. I pull my canoe up. I don't just tie it on the shore. That's why their canoe was tied up. A lot of things didn't look right.
So we were totally surprised when we heard that he'd be lost like that. Jim didn't believe it. My dad didn't believe it that he'd be lost, but it could happen that he'd be drowned. That's how my dad would say, that he might have drowned. So that's one of the things that could happen, but they never did find him. But finding the boat the way it was, that's when they started to have questions and doubts about him too.
Yeah, well, it looked like that if somebody was trying to do something about that, you know, why did he go there and tie that canoe there? Well, this looks like they're lost. Everybody will say that, oh my God, they didn't come back.
Why would they want to get rid of him? Somebody would ask, and then you can have the discussion of, well, they were political people. They were prospectors, but they also knew that, you know, we were going to have big uranium mining. We were going to lose more of our resources, and then have the discussion. But how come they were involved in that? If they were so against it, why were they prospecting?
And this guy shouldn't have never been lost in northern Saskatchewan. He was that good. He could walk through that bush and come out exactly the same spot he went in and out. How this guy died it's a mystery to me. But with the rumors that flew around in this community and the people that knew Jim, I don't believe he could have survived any place.